Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story Circle. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another intriguing woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Brooke-Ward and I'm from England. I invested decades and thousands of pounds into law school to attain a career that, quite frankly, nearly killed me. I spent my adolescent years fighting to become a barrister, and I spent my 30s trying to survive that career. Survive the career trap that no one warns you about, the one that's hiding in plain sight, dressed up as success, the one you didn't choose, the one you just floated into, and somewhere along the way, you're the one you started living, a dream that belonged to somebody else. But the truth is, your childhood already told you who you were meant to be. The problem is, we're taught children should be seen and not heard. And I want to tell you about the trap of becoming exactly who the world expected and discovering somewhere between the achievement and the fulfillment that you've built the wrong life. And I know because I did it myself. Now, I'm an ordinary girl, a girl from Castleford, a mining town in England. And you don't know me, but I can guarantee you've met people like me. You know, the loudmouth, the annoying, the know-it-all drama queen, competitive and argumentative to the bone. I was the kind of girl in trouble every day at school for wearing jeans, trainers, the tiniest little tie, always looking for a loophole in the rules to bend them to my advantage. The one smoking at the school gate, involving herself in each and every playground argument and fight that she had no business being involved in because it gave her some kind of weird thrill. I lived in an area where people loved the drama, the gossip, and anything but work. I had no role models to look up to where I lived. My family hadn't been to university, and nothing gave me that motivation or guidance to do anything better. It was an era where the professions to dream about were lawyers, doctors, or teachers, and I hated school. So I had two options impressed upon me, and they were law or medicine. And I was too impatient to study 10 years in medicine. So law was the only option that was left. But at that age, I wanted to be a dancer. I wanted to be on stage. But I'd been told firmly and repeatedly that dancing wasn't a lifetime career. I wouldn't make any money and I'd be miserable. At that time, I thought it was the only thing I actually liked and that I was actually good at. But I listened to my elders because, of course, they knew best, didn't they? And so, to appease my parents and stop the nagging, I agreed to try for what they called a proper career. But I didn't get the grades to go to law school. And somebody told me about this thing called clearing to get into university. And I thought, brilliant, a clear in. And it was only years later that I understood what clearing actually meant. It was clearing out of leftover spaces at university courses. And I was basically the academic equivalent of a last-minute hotel booking. They didn't really want me, but they'd take my money to balance the books. And so I got into law school, like it's hard. Yes, it is. It's extremely hard. I dropped out before finishing year one. I was a fish out of water. I had no friends. I didn't speak like the people there. I didn't look like the people there. I didn't think like the people there. And so it didn't work out and I dropped out. So I felt like law wasn't for me after all. And so I did become a dancer. I became a professional dancer. I didn't make a living, but I traveled the world. I made some great friends. I made some great memories. And one of those memories is currently my 14-year-old daughter, whose argumentative nature is even a match for mine. And so dancing wasn't a lifetime career after all. So by this stage, I'm 22 years old with no degree, no plan, and pregnant. And you can imagine what people thought. Well, actually, where I was from, not much, because that wasn't shocking. It wasn't a tragedy. Kids had kids young. That's not a judgment, it's just a fact. I wasn't a wasted genius. I was just another sheep, another young mum pushing a pram, claiming benefits. But then something happened. The nagging started again. And this time it wasn't just my parents. This time I also had started to berate myself for being a failure. Why didn't I try harder at school? Why was my life so unappealing? And so, shockingly, I actually went back to law school. And yes, I know it's hard. But this time I had a baby on my hip, a 3-month-old, and barely a pound in my pocket. But I was so determined not to lose at life that the competitive chav in me took over. So I studied while my daughter napped. I read textbooks in soft play centres. I sat through years of training with an imposter syndrome so loud it could have drowned me. And I stayed. I passed. I graduated. And then came the interview for the job. I was asked in job interviews how I would juggle being a barrister and a mother. I was told repeatedly someone with my background would never make it. I didn't speak right. I didn't dress right. I didn't breathe right. That's how hard it was. I was basically told it would be impossible. And I had no idea how hard it was to succeed in this career. I had just run roughshod, flying by the seat of my pants through studying and interviews in some form of manic adult tantrum without actually thinking about my future, where I was going and why. I had 3 years of grueling interview rounds that were soul destroying, each year being told I wasn't the right fit. But the weird thing is, I felt like I couldn't stop. I had to make it. It was the only option. I'd put too much in to turn back now. I felt like I'd spent so much time and energy and money to get there. I couldn't turn back. I would lose too much. And then the strangest thing happened. Once I was in, I didn't know what to do with myself. I had spent every piece of energy I had proving that I could get there. And nobody, not one person, not least myself, had thought, what comes after? So I did what most women do. I kept going. I kept pushing. I worked harder. I reached higher. But I was still met with this imposter syndrome, misogyny, sexism, classism, and pure exhaustion from trying so hard, not only at the job, but on being someone I wasn't, to try and fit in. And I realised getting in was not the finish line. The race hadn't even started, and I kept pushing. And the weird thing is, I loved the job, but I'd find myself crying at 4 a.m. before the case the next day. I felt like life was hard, it was heavy, but it was supposed to be great. I'd made it, I'd succeeded. Why was I so miserable? I was burnt out. And here's what I realised. I had a choice in that moment. I could flatten every part of me that didn't fit in and spend the next 30 years becoming a very convincing impression of someone else and be depressed. Or I could ask a different question. Not how do I fit in, but do I want to be here? And in that moment, I looked at who I was. I was a smart-arsed, witty, streetwise kid with an attitude who had never backed down from an argument in her life. And it turns out that's quite a useful skill at being a lawyer. But more than that, I looked at why I was here. Was this somebody else's dream? Was I miserable because I'd fallen into the career trap? We're sold a story: work hard enough, sacrifice enough, prove yourself enough, get through the door, work your way up, and be grateful. And for a long time, for most women, getting through the door was the problem. The best professions were built for men. Doors were closed to women, and women spent generations fighting just to be let in. Now, that fight mattered. Those battles were real. But here is what nobody told us about winning them. The very narrative of equality, the one we marched for, lobbied for, and built institutions around, has created quietly an invisible new trap. Not the trap of being kept out, the trap of getting in and staying in for the wrong reasons. The career prison. Two versions, both silent and both costly. First, we feel a misplaced loyalty to careers we secretly hate. Because we fought so hard to earn the right to be there, we stay. Not because we want to, we stay because leaving would feel like a betrayal to every woman who came before us. Or second, we chase careers we couldn't access before, not because something in us genuinely is called to them, but because the fact we now can somehow feels enough. And then we're made to feel we should be grateful for being there, but we feel a sense of shame when we aren't grateful. And both of those are traps. And the equality movement, the movement that did so much that was right and necessary, didn't warn us about either of them. Getting in is no longer the problem. Knowing where you're going and why you're going, that's where we've been left entirely on our own. Getting in isn't the achievement to end all achievements. It's not the proof that we belong. It isn't even the ending. It's the beginning of a much harder question. Who were you meant to be? And what is your purpose? Women leave high performance careers at twice the rate of men within the first 5 years. And that's not because they aren't talented enough, not because they didn't work hard enough, because they are exhausted from working incredibly hard for a life they never consciously chose. They stay not because the work sets them on fire, because they feel they've earned it, because they have something to prove, because after everything it cost them to get there, leaving would feel like losing. So they keep going, head down, pushing harder and harder. It's not a confidence problem. It's not an ambition problem. It's not a resilience problem. It's what happens when a woman spends years proving she belongs somewhere without ever stopping to ask whether she actually wants to be there herself. And here's what I hadn't heard or witnessed when I was fighting my way into law. The child I once was had already told me everything I needed to know. When I was 7 years old, I performed. Every room was a stage. I didn't do it because I asked. I didn't do it because someone asked me to. I did it because something in me couldn't not. When I was a teenager, I competed, I danced, I argued, I debated, and I lost track of time when doing all that. And as an adult, I stood in courtrooms and argued for people who couldn't argue for themselves, and I loved it. The work felt right. 3 different decades, 3 different versions of me, one unbroken thread: performance, competition, and justice. The thread for me was never the problem. The thread was always right, but something was off. The acting was draining me. I was performing on top of the work itself. I was pretending to be someone I wasn't just to be taken seriously in a room that had decided before I even opened my mouth what a barrister was supposed to look like. It was the layer of performance that was slowly, quietly taking everything I had, my purpose. And it was then that I realized the child had left clues. I just hadn't been taught how to read them. Purpose has a propensity to keep showing up, the recurring patterns that appears across your whole life in the things you did when you felt most alive, most lit up, most yourself. That child leaves clues about the life you were meant to live. And it's not passion, it goes deeper than that. And when I finally took the time to investigate, when I traced the thread from performing child to competing argumentative teenager to the lawyer arguing for justice, I understood something that changed everything. I wasn't succeeding in law despite who I was. I'd succeeded because of who I'd always been. And I was lucky that the career itself wasn't the trap for me. It was the mismatch of why I was there. But that's not always the case. And I want to be honest with you about something I've learned since. That's not everyone's story. For some women doing this work, tracing the thread, finding the propensity, seeing clearly for the first time leads to a very different answer. The trap isn't always performing the wrong version of yourself inside the right career. Sometimes the trap is spending a decade in the wrong career entirely, held there by sunk cost, by loyalty, by the fear that walking away means the sacrifice was wasted. And imagine staying in a career you wasn't made for and wasting the rest of your life. And that's where the 3 laws of success come in: align, act, attract. Alignment doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes it means having the clarity to go, the clarity to change something, and the clarity to pivot. Align, act, attract is when you attract success, when you act in alignment. And alignment is finding your life's purpose. You do this when you find the clues the child left, the adolescent left, and the clues that you now keep ignoring. And actions are small, purposeful, daily actions in service of that purpose, your purpose. And when you do that intentionally, when you are genuinely aligned and consistently acting from that place, you stop chasing opportunity, and opportunity starts finding you. Not because you're lucky, because you have finally built the conditions for it to reach you. And I want to ask you something before I finish. Think about the child you once were before any person told you what was realistic. What did that child love? What did they do when nothing was at stake? Now think about the teenager you became. What did that teenager lose track of time doing? What made them fight? What made them feel even briefly, even imperfectively, themselves? And now, you, here, today, when do you feel those same things? Even a flicker of it, even buried beneath everything you've built on top of it? Can you find the unbroken thread, a theme through 3 different versions of you? That's not nostalgia. It's not something you grew out of. It is evidence. It is your purpose.
Wow, Chelsea, what an incredible journey you've been on. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No. Can I ask you to drop out of the call and come back in again? It will reset it. I'll put it in the private chat. Technology is great when it works, terrible when it doesn't. We'll give Chelsea a minute to just come back again. There she is. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay. Yeah, that happens sometimes. So I was saying, what an incredible journey you've been on, Chelsea. Now, how did your childhood passions leave clues about your true purpose, do you think?
When I look back and I see the performing side, I always wanted to be on stage. And when I was younger, I always thought that was an actual stage. But being a barrister and performing in court is just akin to that. And when I look back, I thought at the time that I was just a bit of a troublemaker, you know, involving myself in arguments that I didn't really have any business to be in. And looking back now with the benefit of hindsight, it was because I felt a certain type of injustice for somebody and wanted to stick up for them and argue for them on their behalf. And that is exactly what I do now as a lawyer, and those themes sort of stayed with me throughout my life, and I never really grew out of wanting to perform or wanting to be involved in arguments, and it sort of stayed with me through each year, until I suddenly realized, actually, if I put those two elements together,
Yes.
I'm meant to be a lawyer.
It's just incredible. So, why do you think so many women stay trapped in careers that no longer align with who they are?
I think it's because they've tried, and I nearly got to this point. I think it's because they've invested so much time, whether that's time, money, they've sacrificed so much, whether that's parenting or friendships or relationships. And it feels like if they were to try something else at this stage, all those sacrifices are in vain and are wasted. So instead of identifying and recognizing that they aren't wasted, they stay in a career that means they're wasting the rest of their life, because they can't see
Yes.
that it's not a sacrifice. It's a pivot, but we sort of feel like that's somehow failing or losing by sacrificing that, and then that being for nothing.
Yes. Yeah. That is so true. And women get really stuck in that place.
Yeah.
So, what role does social conditioning play in the choices that women make about success?
From my experience, I think because we have fought so hard to get into some of these male dominated spaces, it's almost like, wouldn't we feel a sense of loyalty to the women that fought to get us there, and that if we decide actually we don't want to be there, we're somehow letting those women down. But
Yes.
secondly, we're also inadvertently made to feel this sense of guilt that we should be grateful for being there. We've been allowed in that space, we've been allowed in that room by these men, and we should somehow, put up and shut up and stay there and be grateful that you're actually there. And I think that plays on our minds subconsciously, that we then start to berate ourselves and think, well, why aren't we grateful? We are in this room, we should be grateful. But there is something inside of us, that this niggling feeling that something doesn't feel quite right, and there is
Yeah.
almost this contradiction inside, that we've finally succeeded on paper, but inside I feel miserable. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's because we've succeeded in the wrong career, or
Yeah.
sometimes we've succeeded for the wrong reasons. And I was the latter. I'd succeeded for the wrong reasons. I got there because somebody else told me to get there, not because I thought I wanted to be there myself.
So, how can women reconnect with that younger version of themselves?
I think sometimes they just need to stop and listen. And I think women that are high achievers, or women that have, succeeded into these spaces, usually don't give themselves a moment to stop and listen to what their body and their mind is telling them. And I
Yes.
think just having 30 minutes, an hour to sit down and think about, what did I actually enjoy when I was a child? What
Yeah.
did I enjoy when I was at high school? And what do I enjoy now? And can I identify something in those three generations that is a theme, a recurring pattern, a propensity? And is there something within that theme and propensity that I can introduce into my life now? And I'm not saying, that women need to end the career that they're in and go off on something else. It
Yeah.
could be just introducing something as a side hustle or a hobby, just to give us that spark and that happiness in a small area of our life, and then you build onto that. But I think stopping, slowing down, because you will never hear that theme or see that evidence when you're continuously grinding and hustling, because you don't have the mental bandwidth to identify it.
Yeah, you can't even slow down enough to see it. So, what
Yes.
emotional toll does misalignment have on mental health and well-being, do you think?
It's huge.
Mm,
I got to a point where it was almost every night I felt like I should be happy. I had made it into one of the most hardest careers in England to get into, and I was miserable. I was
yeah,
tired. My eyes were burning. I couldn't concentrate, and all I could think about was how miserable I was. And
yeah,
I'd be sat there at 4 o'clock in the morning crying, having to be up at 6 o'clock the next day to go into court. And I felt like I just couldn't pull myself round, but I
yeah,
couldn't identify what it was. And you sort of, again, you don't stop and take the moment to realize that something isn't right. You just keep going and going and going, and it's almost like, putting a plaster on a patch and bodging the issue and just trying to, get on with it. Shut
yeah,
up, put up, and move on is the mentality in this day and age, and quite frankly, it leads to burnout. And when you burn out, you're not going to succeed in anything for a long time, because building
yeah,
back up that resilience is extremely difficult. And so it is
absolutely.
huge. Living the rest of your life miserable naturally
Yeah.
has a negative impact. Maybe not now, maybe not next year, but 5 years, 10 years, huge.
So how do we know when ambition is no longer serving us?
It's hard.
It's not easy.
And life feels hard. It
Yeah,
feels heavy. There is a inner feeling, instinct that something doesn't feel quite right.
yeah.
And it's that niggling feeling that you can't quite put your finger
Finger.
on it.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
life
yeah.
isn't meant to be hard. And when you think about when you were a child, those moments where you lose track of time and you happy and laughing and imaginations running wild, and you have those moments, whether it is just fleeting moments as you get older where you do lose track of time, and there's the old adage, time flies when you're having fun.
That's
And it
true.
does, it's right. And when you are acting in alignment, you almost lose that track of time, because it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel heavy. It doesn't feel wrong. It feels right. And so you don't have that life burden hanging on your shoulders. And so life feels easier. I'm not going to say it feels easy completely, because I don't think
Yeah.
that would be correct. There are always times and moments where it does feel hard, but life does feel easier when you have that alignment.
So what advice would you give to women who are afraid to pivot later in life?
I would say you don't need to take a drastic decision to, quit your job tomorrow and start something new. Do
Yeah.
it incrementally and in stages. And the reality is, you've got to where you've got to incrementally and in stages. And so sometimes it's doing the same and repeating that, but
Yeah.
with the full knowledge and clarity that where you're going is somewhere you actually want to be.
To
And the
go.
thing
Yeah.
is, in life, we don't always make or recognize the right decisions. And so doing it slowly and incrementally allows us the time to identify whether or not that is right for us.
Yes.
um, and so what I usually say to people is sit down, do the work, identify the three themes from the three generations, and see and identify if there is something that you can implement in small phases. Is there something that you can do as a hobby that identifies that? Some people might have a creative side. They might actually want to be a photographer. So rather than, quitting your commercial corporate day job and going into photography, you might start it as a hobby and then build on that and see whether that flow
Yes.
state starts happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, my last two questions are a bit of a thought experiment, Chelsea. In the first one, I'm going to teleport you back to that young woman who went into life without a straight plan, learned to take all the twists and turns and bends, to get to this point, if you could go back and give yourself 3 nuggets of wisdom based on what life has taught you up until this point, what would those 3 nuggets of wisdom be?
Believe in yourself always, because if you don't believe in yourself, then why should anybody else? And the reality is, only you know where you want to go, and only you know how to get yourself there. Nobody's going to do that for you. Secondly, don't take everything too seriously. Life is for living and being happy, and just taking life too seriously leads to that inner dialogue of fear and doubt and all the negative emotions that come with that. And the reality is, nothing that happens in terms of a career, certainly, is anything to be too worried about. Everything can always get better. And thirdly would be slow down, because life is not a race. Life is a journey, and there is no destination to get to, because the destination, when you get there, always moves. And so just enjoy the process.
You have to enjoy the ride. You're so right with that last one. We forget that a lot of the time.
I have to keep reminding myself all the time, slow down, enjoy it.
Oh my gosh. Last question is futuristic, and I'm going to teleport you into the future this time. And we are going to go and sit with a 90-year-old you. She's sitting in her rocking chair, surrounded by her children, her grandchildren, whoever's with you at the end. If I could teleport you into the future to meet this wise woman who has led you up until that point, what will you say to her when you finally meet her?
Thank you. And the reason that I say thank you is because she was able to identify at a stage where I could do something about it.
Yeah.
And she took the very hard decision and hard choices to keep going and keep pushing and just live that hard journey. And
Yes.
I recognize that some women don't or haven't slowed down to the point where they can make those decisions in a time where they can genuinely do something about it. And I know people that have spent their entire working lives in a career that they hated, that led to a life that they hated, that led to a time that they couldn't do anything about it, and it was too late.
Yes.
And so I would say thank you to the future me.
Oh, I love it. That is so beautiful. Yeah, a lot of women don't realize that the wise woman is already in us. As she is that quiet voice that whispers, say yes, say no, go left, go right. We look outside of ourselves for answers and solutions all the time, instead of going within and tuning into that energy of who you are becoming. So
Yes.
Thank you for hearing your wise woman, for listening to her, acknowledging her at the end. This is absolutely beautiful. And I think it's a reminder to every woman who's listening to this podcast as well. So tell me, how are you supporting and empowering other women, and how can people get in touch with you and connect with you?
So I am on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, Diary of a _barrister. I do a lot of coaching and mentoring, usually within the legal space, because that's where my struggles were and where I know the best in my opinion. So I have a website called www.diaryofabarrister.co.uk, where I offer coaching programs to those wanting a career in law. I'm also just in the process of building the Career Council Confidence Academy, which is aimed at women building their confidence and identifying their purpose so that they can live a life in alignment. So you can find me in those areas.
Fantastic. Wow. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for coming online and sharing your incredible story with our community today. And thank you
for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. The Her Story Circle is not just a podcast. We're a social impact movement that brings you the stories and voices of women from all over the world. We share these stories to uplift you, to inspire you, to energize you, but most importantly, to take you from where you are now to where you're trying to go. So if you are a woman in the field of law, wanting support, wanting help, wanting to pivot, don't try and do it on your own. Here's an expert who can handhold you and guide you all the way. Or if you know someone who is struggling in the field, please tag them on this video, share this on your social media so we can reach more people as well. And I have to thank Jennifer Sharp, who is on LinkedIn right now saying so much wisdom. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for tuning in. It's always good when we get some comments and feedback from people who are listening to the podcast as well. Chelsea, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who was here. I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody, with yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and bye for now. Chelsea, don't go away. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making her story.